Hello. All right. So as many of you may have noticed on the way in here, my talk didn't particularly have a title until actually last night at probably 5 in the morning. Well, many people here were doing the game jam. I was doing the slide jam. I'm very happy with this talk, however. So, all right. So my talk today is feature or bug. All right, but in talking to people here at this conference, I realized that I still have to do these intro slides of who I am and why the context for this. So my name is Jay Freeman, although everyone online knows me as Sork. I am mostly known for doing reverse engineering spelunking tools. I also developed the App Store-like thing for jailbroken devices. When I say App Store-like thing, however, that's a complete misnomer, which we're going to get to in a second. At this conference, however, I'm mostly known for doing talks on a thing that I built called Script, which is a JavaScript Objective-C hybrid. Check it out, it's awesome. It was actually helping at the Stump the 360 things yesterday. All right. So I said App Store-like thing. A lot of people look at me, they're like, oh, Cydia, it's an alternative app store. It's where all the reject bin for all the stuff that doesn't get into the App Store goes. You talk about Steve Jobs, you talk about, you would always talk about freedom from as opposed to freedom to. Of course, Steve Jobs really kind of meant freedom from porn. He actually said once during a press conference, will there be alternative app stores on iOS? He said no, there will not be a porn store for the iPhone. But Cydia really isn't an app store, and that's why you don't, it isn't really an app store, it's more of a feature store. So contrary to propaganda, there's not always an app. So yes, Cydia is the feature store. I'm starting to get through these intro slides quickly, and apparently I'm screwing them up. So, things that you'll find in Cydia are things like custom looks for your device, such as Winterboard, which is allows you to change all the colors, all the icons, all the images and graphics, even in third-party apps, even inside of your own apps. 5-icon dock is a really simple thing. It puts 5 icons at the bottom. But these are examples of like new functionality that you can get in your system. Sometimes it's really frivolous things. I actually really love Barrel. It causes all your icons, and they're sliding back and forth to all organize themselves into a circle and then roll on and off screen. You can also make modifications inside of other applications. This is a modification to the YouTube app in order to add a downloads panel. All right, so how do we do all these things? We do them using something I developed called Cydia Substrate, which is designed for doing runtime code modification. So, kind of like a Game Genie for an iPhone. It allows you to go and make modifications to all the software that you've got running when it loads. Bunch of code that I'm not going to get into detail much here, but essentially we're replacing the call to connect with this call to new connect. But much simpler for people Objective-C, I say much simpler, although many of you don't operate this level. We're going to replace UI color in it with red, green, blue, alpha with a version that jacks up the red and turns off the green. Still looks kind of C-like. We usually are dealing with this in something called logos, which is a preprocessor that looks a little bit like Objective-C and allows you to kind of replace a method and call through the original. Kind of like a category with really crazy syntax. More recently, I provided something that looks a lot like actual categories, but allows you to use super calls in order to go to the original implementation. Normally, categories just kind of destroy the original. All right, but again, just trying to provide context of what it is that I do. I tend to describe this as adding more cowbell to an existing application. All right, so actually now entering this talk. You've seen various talks throughout the course, the general sessions throughout the course of this conference, and at various of them, it's been kind of a continuation in a way of things that have been said before. We've seen Mike when he was actually started, when we last met, by the way, you may be wondering why I'm here, I quit. We had a talk, I actually forgot his name now, but Kyle, which was on the last job of part 2. Today I'm also going to be kind of connecting through to some bits of my previous talk. I'm going to be providing all the context for that very quickly, however. All right, so my talk last year was missing obvious signals, which was actually ended up getting largely derailed, I will argue, by Mike Lee during when I was at one of his talk, Ethics Made Easy. And it actually kind of made me realize that my talk seemed really not very deep. He ended up having a panel called Ethics in Our Industry, where he asked the question, what is a difficult ethical decision you've been forced to make in the course of your profession? or something like that. I don't quite remember what he said. It made me, however, think, how would I answer that question? And that's where I ended up changing a lot around my talk. Actually, during my talk ended up having many different modified title slides as I was going through and making modifications to them, coming to essentially a crescendo or punchline about jailbreaking itself, and how what we do is we use bugs in systems in order to take control of them to do the things that we want. But these bugs have ramifications on people who are not just us. So this is Jeff Forstall. He's the person who came up with the responsible disclosure policy. If you've ever heard of responsible disclosure, you find a bug, you tell Microsoft. Microsoft then has 90 days to fix it. Then Microsoft fixes it, you then tell the world about it. That way no one gets affected by your bug until Microsoft has a chance to fix it. Jeff Forstall is all for this. Jeff Forstall at Black Hat last year gave a talk on a bug he had found he called Master, 2 years ago, a bug called Master Key. By the time he had gone to the conference, I had already released a full end-to-end implementation that allowed you to take control of any Android device trivially, to the point where he didn't even bother building the proof of concept he was going to build. He still had it on his to-do list. He simply told everyone to use mine. Now, why would I do these sort of things? I mean, essentially, because this is a very big ethical question, jailbreaking, I was described as the ability to do all these crazy, funny things, awesome stuff to your phone. But in a way, jailbreaking is the process of weaponizing exploits of zero-day vulnerabilities so that people might do all of these things. All right, so I continued then through the process of my motivation and how it's all fit together. And that, I recommend, if you're interested in this, you watch my previous talk, which I believe 360 has recorded. But looking at bugs. All right, so I've been kind of looking through bugs a lot. And so during the course of the last year, I've also started doing talks on how bugs operate, how do you use bugs. That's something I was talking to people here in the audience over the course of the last few days, and they were asking questions about how do you do this sort of stuff that you do. In a way, it's always kind of funny because I think of using exploits. I think of hacking kind of like magicians, where you end up having people who are pulling interesting stunts, sleight of hand, in order to make you go, wow, that was amazing. And there's a lot of things that are kind of in the magician's code that are kind of similar in hacking culture. About, well, that's your bug. I mean, it's like I'm not going to do a trick using your trick. Like I'll come up with my own trick, or I'll figure out my own flair on your trick. Penn and Teller, they actually have essentially an entire shtick where they tell you the secrets behind the tricks. But a lot of times they're doing it with their own tricks. Where they will tell you the secret of a trick that is something that is actually 300 years old and everyone kind of already knows it anyway. And it's just, but then they will do a trick and not tell you how it works. And sometimes I feel as I'm doing these talks on how hacking works that I'm trying to become something like Penn and Teller, trying to tell you the secrets behind the magic. All right, so we're going to start with one here, a really simple one you made for it called Shellshock. So Shellshock is a bug for Bash, which is the shell that you would have if you open up terminal on your Mac. All right, so in Bash, you're able to declare functions using this syntax here. The colon there is just like essentially a dummy line, like I don't want to do anything. You can export these functions. And the reason we export them is that if you would then run another shell, that shell will also have this function. So now we have to ask the question, how does the function get from one shell to the other shell? It gets stored in something called an environment variable. Environment variables are inherited by processes as they spawn each other. If we look at the environment variable list, we see that there is one. It's called x, named after the function. It contains what looks like the function. We can then ask the question, how does Bash go through the list of environment variables and piece back together the original function? Well, it looks for any variable that begins with open parenthesis, closed parentheses, squiggly brace, colon. Sorry, space, squiggly brace, those 4 characters. And it just tacks function on it, tacks the name of the function, and runs it. Okay, so it's a problem, because if I make an environment variable that includes a semicolon after the function, and includes any code that I want, now that shell will run anything that I want. This was the original Shellshock bug. I was on the mailing list. I was like, you can also do this. And they were like, that's a different bug. I'm like, it's the same bug. So there are multiple fixes for this thing. So Brian Fox is the person who developed Bash originally, and he's the person who put the code for Shellshock. This is a picture of Brian Fox, the photo from Wikipedia that's on the left. On the right, we have some photos that were taken from a camera from the MIT AI lab, probably back around maybe when this bug might have been being developed. Brian, however, is also a very good friend of mine. And so I had the pleasure of a few things, actually one of which is that the Pwn2Own competition this year at Black Hat, there was a most hyped bug award went to Shellshock. Because if you start thinking about what you can do with this bug, it turns out pretty But it got a great name, it got a lot of press. Reporters were interviewing Brian. Brian was asked the question, what went through your mind when you heard that this bug had been found? And he's like, ha, my plan worked. All right, because you have to take into consideration, his comment to everybody was like, you realize the only way people came up with to exploit this bug is if you've got a web server somewhere, and that web server has a CGI script. CGI takes HTTP headers and puts them in environment variables. And then that CGI script spawns a sub-bash shell. Then you can succeed in getting arbitrary code execution on that server. That happens. I mean, I even had a web service that was running a Git web on the web server that comes with Git. Happens to do this in certain cases, and so I had to do an update to that. But it's not something that was, oh, we're going to own everything, we're going to do your Mac sitting, and your Mac is subject to Shellshock. People are like, when's Apple going to release a patch for this? It's like, well, I don't really have any clue how you're going to be able to exploit the one running on my Mac. For all I know, I'm actually still running the next exploitable one, honestly. But when he wrote this, it's not even like he made a mistake. It's like when he wrote this, the internet was just barely a thing. HTTP didn't exist. The web was still a dream in somebody's mind by seeing the very first implementation of Gopher that had come out earlier that year, and they were thinking how we could scale this up into something that would actually allow all sorts of complicated, awesome things. The idea that you would have a copy of Bash running on a server in the middle of nowhere, people would be using services from that computer, and they would have no clue who those people were. And then that there would be a mechanism by which you could cause environment variables to be controlled across the internet, and that you'd be able to, this is just nuts. And people are like, what are you thinking? What were you thinking when you heard about the mistake you made? He's like, it wasn't even a mistake. All right, so we're now going to play a little game that I like to call bug or feature. All right, we're going to start with UI mutable index path. If you were at Stump 360 yesterday, somebody asked a question about when will two NS index paths be compare the same but have different hash codes? And the answer was when one of them is actually a UI mutable index path. And this was we ended up answering it by finding the radar that this person had filed. His username was Levy Rocker. I don't remember if he's there. What's your name? Levi Grocker. Okay. All right. So, how many people think this is a bug? You don't have many people raising their hand, actually. All right. How many people think this is a feature? I'm actually surprised. If about split half-half, people think this is a feature bug versus about the people who actually bothered raising their hand. I think this is a bug. All right. How about MacBook case closed puts it right to sleep? You think this is a feature? Most people raise their hand. Almost everybody. How many people think it's a bug? Very few people. I think it's a bug. I find myself in situations, and I see other people doing this, where they're wandering around a conference with their Mac open in their hand, trying their best to avoid it closing, because it's in the middle of doing something kind of important on the internet, and if they just close it, it's not even like if they open it quickly, it's fine. It's like it just starts disconnecting everything as fast as it can. And then when you open it back up, it's all reset from scratch. I've ended up in situations where, while trying to juggle multiple open MacBooks, I've actually smashed their screens together and destroyed them. I hate this, and a lot of people do. If you do searches online, you see tons of people asking questions. How do I keep my MacBook running when I close it? And it's not even like you think, well, it's a heat thing, right? Well, if you close it and you attach an external monitor, it stays on. If there's it's the bottom of the case is most of the heat sink for the thing. It's not actually there's all sorts of myths about where there's a fan along the backside that's blowing stuff. It's there's no particularly good reason for this except for the idea that, well, this is how it should happen. I would love to have a 5-second delay even, just so that if I just open it back up again, I don't lose all my progress. That'd be kind of nice. All right. This is one I did a demo of. If you were at the game jam really, really late last night, I did a little parlor trick for people. So this is one you can all do actually on your devices. If you'd like to have folders nested in folders on your latest version of iOS, what you do is you get two folders on your screen and you put them in opposite corners of the screen. You then click and hold one of them, you kind of lift it up. Then, all the times I've done it, I've also done it, dropped it, and then I've lifted it again. This could be superstition, of course, because it's not even superstition, but I just haven't tested anything else and I don't want you guys to tell me it didn't work. All right, then the other corner, what you do is you just sit there rapidly tapping it for half a minute. And eventually, it just gives up. And it's like, all right, let's open the folder. And then you're looking silly there. You're just rapidly tapping this folder, hoping that it will open. And it does eventually open, and then you can just drop your folder inside it. How many people think this is a bug? Everyone thinks it's a bug. How many people think this is a feature? Okay, so actually, when you actually account for, so that would say it's only like 2/3 people think it's a bug, 1/3 people think it's a feature. A lot of people want to be able to nest folders inside of folders. Actually, the person it was Tom, I forgot his last name, but it was Tom that I did this to on his phone. He was like, "Oh man, this is awesome! I wanted that one to go in there." How did you even know that was that your parlor trick to figure out which one wanted to nest to the other one? All right, people actually will jailbreak their phones in order to get nested folder support. All right, here's one. So on iOS before 7, if you were trying to take a screenshot of an action on your screen, so if you were, for example, bring up the control center from the bottom and you tried to take a screenshot, control center would just close. If you tried to try to take a screenshot of this bug you were having halfway between things and you were to take a screenshot, it would just because you're drag, like Facebook's got a bunch of animated transitions and you're trying to take a screenshot of it, it would just kind of snap to one side. Bug? Feature. So everyone thinks bug, hardly anyone thinks feature. No one thinks it's a feature, Snapchat thinks it's a feature. So if you think about how Snapchat works, people here don't know much about Snapchat. Snapchat is an application designed to, you send picture messages to somebody else that expire after like 10 seconds. And the other person is supposed to it's really difficult for them to save it. If they do save it, then the other person gets a notification that the message was saved. Preferably the message is not saved at all. The way that the app works is you have to push and hold the person whose picture you want to see, and you have to leave your finger on the screen as long as you're looking at it. And the entire design of this app is based around the idea that if you try to take a screenshot of this position, your finger touch will immediately disappear from the screen. I believe it actually happens before the screenshot actually happens. Snapchat instantaneously removes the photo, and it does not save the photo until iOS 7, when there was a bunch of news saying Snapchat doesn't let you know someone took a screenshot on iOS 7. And Snapchat was really upset. A lot of users were really upset, although frankly, I don't think the Snapchat's mechanism is worthy of respect because it's fundamentally it's broken and it just encourages people to do dumb things with photos. But this was actually covered by the LA Times covered this, the Huffington Post. I mean, it was like a big deal to people that Snapchat stopped working. All right, next one. So on iOS 7 or greater, or actually it turns out there was a hidden feature on iOS 5 or lower, screenshots generate a notification. That way Snapchat keeps working. This was discovered during the beta that Snapchat stopped working. Apple gave them a feature so that they weren't sad that this bug was going away. How many people think that this is a feature? A lot of people. How many people think this is a bug? Very few people think this is a bug. I think this one's a bug. Because I am going into YikYak trying to take a screenshot of something that they don't care if you take screenshots of YikYak. They have a share feature, all sorts of things. Like if you have access to a post, it just sits in your thing forever. It's not like it's trying to delete your ability to see content after any period of time. I want to take a screenshot for a conference that I was going to, and it's like, you look like you're taking a screenshot. You know what? We built this amazing share feature. You should try out our share feature. This reminds me of when I go to a website and I copy a little block of text and I hit Control-C and I go to paste it to somebody and it's got 5 pages of, you should read more at my website. You do realize this came from my website. Oh, you probably don't know the title of the article. Here's the title of the article and all sorts of stuff. I would much rather web browsers not give people copy notifications so that I could get a little tiny snippet of the text without getting a massive 3-page thing. And I would also kind of like screenshots, which is my equivalent of copy and paste, to not have this notification feature. And by the way, that doesn't mean that I want Snapchat to be, allow people to share all the photos. I don't want Snapchat to exist. Because I think that it doesn't really, it's impossible to build, and it makes people do dumb things with photos. All right. And so by the way, now that Snapchat doesn't need that weird user interface anymore, apparently this year they're considering making it so you just have a normal user interface. You can click on it and slide through the photos like this, rather than have the weird touch thing. All right, go to fail. That's a fun one. All right, so here's the bug. We're going to initialize a SHA-1 context. We're going to stick stuff in it. And if there are any errors, we're going to go to the end of function, which is our fail block. And we're also just going to go to fail also. And because the previous thing succeeded, error will be success. This will return success. We just didn't do any of this, and it just worked. How many people think this is a bug? How many people think this is a feature? No one thinks it's a feature. I don't think this one's a good feature. Yes, even I don't think this one's a feature. But you know who does think this is a feature? CIA, FBI. This is CIA tried to crack security of Apple devices. The agency tried to create a dummy version of development software that would allow it to insert surveillance back and ask. FBI has gotten to the point where they're like, can you just please prevent people from encrypting things? We're just kind of sick of trying to break your encryption. Can you just stop that? I was actually hoping that somebody was going to raise their hand. But, all right. So here's one on an Android device. So this is when the device, so a lot of Android devices people think of, oh, they're open. You can flash whatever operating system you want on it. So in order to make that work, safely, when you turn on the feature to allow you to flash any operating system to it, it brings up this little screen, Unlock Bootloader, and it asks you about whether you sure you want to do this, and it makes a point that unlocking the bootloader will also delete all personal data on your phone, a factory data reset. This way, I cannot take your phone, install a modified version of the operating system on it, and then steal all your software from it, steal all your personal data from it immediately. It at least deletes all of your data. Now, if I told you that this doesn't work, because what it does is it just does that on next boot, and it puts a command that on next boot it does that, and all you had to do to turn that off is fastly going unlock, yes, and then really quickly with a piece of software, clear the cache file, and then it won't do that. This is a bug. Okay, feature. Awkwardest person I thought thinking this is a feature, cyanogen. Now, I can see why. So I was at Big Android Barbecue a year and a half ago, and Cyanogen announces the Cyanogen mod installer that allows you to very easily install Cyanogen mod on whatever phone you've got. And he's talking about just how amazingly easy it is. And so, okay, so actually I was like, at the time I was looking at this particular problem, and I was like, this is actually a really hard problem, because if you really want to do this correctly, you need to back up all the user's data. You need to put all the data back. And I don't know if any of you use an Android device. Honestly, at this point, I kind of hope not. That's the point that I'm at with dealing with Android devices and all these phones. But if you try to back up data from it, and you try to, just good luck, that's not going to happen. I once just tried to set it up with my friend. Like, he wasn't doing anything crazy with his phone. He just bought a normal Android phone, another normal Android phone. I was just trying to transfer SMS messages from one to the other. I ended up having to jailbreak both of his devices. And then sit around and try to like manipulate the SQLite database that was stored and try to figure out what kind of weird modifications we made, because there was no way to back it up. So I'm like, how do you deal with a backup problem? He kind of gives me this wink. He's like, we got this. We don't need to back it up. What? So I actually go on, this is Android installer. So I actually go on IRC and I'm talking to Jay Case, who does a lot of Android hacking. I actually kind of remember this. I kind of remember him saying something about how that feature was broken. And lo and behold, Jay Case was like, oh yeah. The best kept secret of this funny little IRC channel is that you just clear that little cache thing, and it goes away. So all right. Now, okay, we talked about Android being open and all this other stuff. First Android hardware is the G1. G1 was a lockdown device. G1, people found a bug. Actually, it wasn't G1. People found a bug. It's a bug that was filed, an issue filed against ConnectBot, which is the SSH terminal that people would use on Android. So, what steps will reduce the problem? You connect to a remote Unix machine. You call reboot to reboot the remote machine. You type reboot into the keyboard. Hit enter. The remote machine reboot as well as the phone. What is the expected output? The expected output is I reboot the remote computer, but instead, the remote computer is rebooted as well as the phone. What version of the product are you using? What this person doesn't even know, he's just using the stuff. This is a very normal user filing a very normal bug. Bug? Feature. Okay. Well, people who raise their hands, almost no one said feature, almost everyone said bug. Humorously enough, this wasn't even a problem with ConnectBot. ConnectBot's code was perfect. This was a bug in Android, and my respect, a glorious feature. What it was is that the keyboard was attached continually to a terminal that was logged in as root. And you could type anything you wanted, and it would just do it. You could open up the address book and type reboot enter, and it would reboot. And then the most amazing part about this is that they happened to ship a telnet daemon as one of the few binaries that was there, and if you run telnet-d as root when you log into telnet, you are root. It was great. Why do we even have to do this? And so I'm going to take just nothing. I'm talking about Android at this iOS conference. Well, I'm making fun of them. We always hear about how Android is so open. I don't think it's open. All right, so Andy Rubin's got this definition of open. MKDR Android, CD Android, repo in, and all this stuff. Download the source code build. That's what he's talking about, right? So, all right, let's say we want to do something open. This Android's so open. We're going to build a modified Android. We're going to build Cyanogen mod. All right, great. Our plan, phase 1, develop cool software. Phase 3, profit, whether that means by making money, as now actually Cyanogen is in a corporation, or whether it means by changing the world in a positive way. We're going to profit in some way by running software. In phase 2, Always phase 2, unintended numbers get scanned. So phase 1, we're going to git clone make, and Andrew Rubin told us exactly how to pull this off. Phase 2, of course, we all know is make install. That's how you install things. Now, phase 1, I'm going to say I don't even care about. We already demonstrated that I will sit around and I will just throw more cowbell at things by using Game Genius in order to make it work. I will disassemble and patch. I will do runtime instrumentation, but I don't know how to handle make install on almost any Android device. The only ones that actually let you do this are a small number of Nexus devices. And they're like, everyone's, oh, I'll just buy those Nexus devices. No one buys Nexus devices. The Yankee Group surveyed 16,000 US smartphone customers throughout much of 2013 and found the percentage of those who bought a Google Nexus smartphone in the previous 6 months was below 5%, while the percentage owning one was less than 1%, but improved in August to 1.04%. The margin of error in polling was about 1%. Google Nexus devices aren't having much of an impact on the market, says the analyst at the Yankee Group. Who is Samsung? HTC, Motorola, but not even really. It's just Samsung. Everything is Samsung. It's Samsung versus Apple. And this is something that is actually made very relevant to an iOS conference. If you're actually wondering what the competition to iOS is, it's really not Android, it's Samsung. All of the stuff that you see online is all people doing this like Samsung versus Apple sort of things. And the reason why, Samsung may only hold 41% of the Android smartphone market, but they receive 95% of the profit. Android has, another way to think about this is that Android in total has 43% of the profit in the smartphone market. Samsung is 41% of the profit in the smartphone market. So you're looking at Samsung's 41% versus Apple's nearly 50%. Like that's how it actually is playing out in the market. There's an article by Bloomberg that was talking about how Google may make Android, but Samsung makes all the money. All right. So who's supposed to stop all of this? I guess GPL is supposed to stop all of this. GPL is a license that was put together by Richard Stallman a long time ago in order to make certain that we always had freedoms in order to be able to modify our software. And in fact, some of the code that runs on Android, particularly the Linux kernel that it's based on, is GPL software. The problem, however, is that he didn't foresee this concept called TiVoization, where you're going to take a device, you're going to put a bunch of GPL software on it, you're going to lock down the device to the point where you can't actually change any of the software out of it, which then brought us to GPL3, and of course the commentary that many Android devices essentially contain non-true TiVoice executables of Linux. Right. So back to bugs for a little bit, just in order to see like the kinds of bugs that we. One of the reasons now to use Android bugs is so I'm actually. Essentially, this is like a demonstration to you of how simple modifications can lead to people simple mistakes can lead to people controlling and owning your software. And Android is great because it has an infinite number of very trivial bugs that allow you to take complete control of the device. So almost every little random Chinese Android device, so this is actually JPace essentially, his claim to fame is if you've got a Chinese device, he will take control of it for you. Has in its initialization scripts, the engineer at some point got really frustrated and added a chmod 777 to some folder. Because they just couldn't keep the permissions that folder from getting changed in the way they kept them writing to it. And what you do is you just make that a symlink to anything, and now you can write to it. By the way, this is actually a kind of bug that we've used in iOS jailbreaks before as part of the backup restore steps. There's a symlink traversal with a chmod. It's really difficult for me to demonstrate where the bug is on an iOS device because it's a lot of disassembly. All right, here's a bug. You can't really read the screen. I don't know if anyone can see the bug in this. You feel like blur your eyes, I want to say. This is a bug that you get your motor memory, your muscle memory of looking at code should detect, not your understanding of the code. Anyone can see the slide? Yeah, so somebody said there's 2 plus 1s. So we're looking at EOCD I plus 1, I plus 2, I plus 1. There's this great comment that you actually can't read here. Maybe you can read it, but you almost can't read it. It actually tries to explain that the goal of this code is to verify that this sequence of bytes occurs in the code in the correct, it does not occur in the binary, and if it does occur in the binary, that would be a horrible security failure. So we have to check these 4 bytes. And they did it wrong. So here's a bug called Rage Against the Cage. This was the Android debug bridge that allows you to connect the device over USB and then do debugging over the Java debug protocol, or take screenshots, all that sort of stuff. It runs as an unprivileged user. On Unix, typically you run as root. You take over a root-only socket. You then drop to a normal user. You use setGID and setUID to do this. This code does not work because it does not check the errors of setGID or setUID. You should always, always, always check your errors. You're like, well, how would that even fail? I'm root. I can become anyone I want. unless that user has a quota and they're already past their quota. So Rage Against the Cage is you fork bomb the shell user. You're just sitting there and rattling the cage of the shell user, trying to, like, every time anything gets killed, you're bringing another process in immediately, such that when the debug daemon gets killed and restarted, it does not succeed in becoming shell, and it's still root, and then you just log into it kind of like the common thing. Here's a fun example of multi-part failure. So here we have an array, m-part minors of size max partitions. All right, function is going to go through, it takes a parameter part n, we get the value temp. A to I, we're going to take that and convert it to part num. We're then going to verify that part num is greater than dis num parts, and if it is, then we're going to assign, we're going to like clamp it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take m part minors and we're going to look into that array and we're going to attempt to dereference part num, but we didn't. This isn't a check that clamps. This is an opposite check. This actually is like if you are trying to use a really large part number, then we will simply assume there are that many part numbers. Oh. Okay, they fixed that one. If we win array overrun, we can now mount the SD card partition on the SD boot cards. All right, great. New code. New code checks to see if part num is greater than or equal to max partitions. That's how you do a check, right? We've got 4 items. You check to see if the value is greater than or equal to 4. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that value, we're going to subtract 1. Oh, wait. Why are you subtracting 1 from it? You're subtracting 1 from it because this is a number from 1 to 4, not a number from 0 to 3. Now we can't even use the 4th partition. So now the code just has a bug. Well, we'll fix it. So by the way, this is actually how many months later? So this is July, now in November, we're fixing this bug. Fix an offset 1 bug that makes partition 4 unusable. All right, code works now, right? No. So here we've still got this problem, which is that A2I is returning a signed number. If you pass in -1, well, that's less than that. And it works. So now we're next year, April, add bounds checking and for minors. Now they didn't even remove the other one. They just started tacking on more bounds checks. But here's a bug that we used iOS 5 jailbreak, Corona. So this is what's known as a format string vulnerability. So YYErr is a function that takes a format and a list of arguments, kind of like printf. YYErr is being used by the tokenizer, by the thing that parses the configuration file for something. It's called Raccoon, doesn't matter what it is. It's an IP security thing. So the configuration file, every time it finds a token it doesn't understand, it takes the message, the error message that was put in, and it passes it through to plogv. And so it gets the variadic argument list, it passes that through to here, but it modifies the format string. What it does is it just adds the path of the file, it adds the line number of the file, it adds the token, and it puts the original format string at the end. This is fine unless the token includes a percentage mark. Because now you've added extra percentage marks into the format string. And so what they were doing then is they were using these crazy list of like percentage 224U, percentage 402, $HHN. If you ever have a chance, I recommend looking at the incredibly large amount of documentation that comes with printf. Because printf looks like it's something that is very, very simple, that you format some things out there. But it turns out that you can like ask it how many characters have been written so far, put that into the next thing, read off as a pointer, indirect that, and store it to there. And you can end up using those kinds of techniques in order to use printf to write arbitrary bytes of memory at arbitrary locations. Now, should it matter, of course, because you type the printf format string into your code, right? Never let the user control the format string. All right, so by this happening, now we end up looking back again at Mike's talk from yesterday, which was where at some point he made a comment, don't beat people by accident. And you probably think you know where I'm going with this, which is the kind of concept that I had talked about last year. You might think, well, this entire talk essentially don't beat people by accident. So last year I was talking about bugs as ethical issues. I was bringing up that even simple bugs, the kind of bugs that you might be making on a daily basis, can cause serious problems. So Android app causes National Weather Service website blackout. All it was doing is it just had a broken retry loop. But it was doing it so frequently that it took down the infrastructure that the National Weather Service had, because they weren't ready for somebody to be just doing this weird, like, distributed Android bot attack, essentially, against them. This can cause serious problems. Some people might be relying on National Weather Service for information that would actually, like, save somebody's life. So last year I talked about, Zuckerberg's comment always about move fast and break things, and how finally at F8 last year he was like, no, move fast with stable infra. Because when you move fast and break things all the time, sometimes they just don't work. But that's not the point that I'm making today. All right, so the point that I'm making today is bugs are problematic because sometimes bugs look friendly. Sometimes bugs are things that we like. Sometimes bugs are things that we keep as pets. Sometimes bugs are things that look like things that we like but aren't. So there's this Japanese beetle that looks just like a ladybug, but it bites. So people tell you, oh, it's a ladybug, it doesn't bite. It depends on exactly what color it is. It's kind of too orange, it might bite. Bugs are not features. But the problem that we have is we've ended up in a scenario where people actually are using bugs as features. We've got on a random user and XDA forums. Just everybody remember and remind others to not accept that security credentials update that keeps pushing. From this perspective of this person, that security bug was a feature. Because that security bug let him do something that he considered important. But we really have to keep telling ourselves, bugs are not features, bugs are dangerous. If that security bug was what was keeping that user safe from people stealing all of his bank account information, what was keeping that user safe from their ex-spouse tracking them everywhere they go, we want to fix that bug. But he really doesn't want that bug to be fixed. Snapchat, actually recently, Snapchat is locking out users who use Snapchat-oriented jailbreak tweets. This ended up causing this massive, snafu. All sorts of people were getting involved, and because essentially what Snapchat was doing was saying that this large percentage of their users who were doing things, which I'm not necessarily agree with the things that they're doing. Nor do I agree with that. I don't agree with Snapchat. Is the problem. They were locking up their users. It's like a battle against users, and the real reason I had a slide in here though was not to try to make you feel for any of these users. It's to make you, in this case, make you realize you're going to lose. Because Snapchat invested a ton of time into this. They actually had a really awesome way of doing it. It's actually a more complicated encryption technique for handling all their control flow than FairPlay uses by Apple. It had all the techniques that Apple was using, except it had even more, which were specifically designed to try to cause substrate techniques to not work. And it took the guy who was making these modifications, I think it was 2 days in order to figure out how to get around it. And I was actually prepared to help him if need be. I had done it in an hour or so. But it was you're gonna lose. You're just and so the real point that I would want to about Snapchat that I want to make with this is that again, if you're building a system like Snapchat around the idea that you're going to keep users' pictures secure, you're not. Please do not tell people you're going to keep those users' pictures secure, and then don't try to take it out on people who are modifying the software when it's really your business model that's causing the problems. All right. Which leads us to some of the work that I've been doing. Actually, I've been doing this work for a long time, but some of the updates from this last year. Digital Lending Copyright Act is a law, which is whose purpose is to protect people's copyrighted works. It's part of the international treaty, and so actually, what is the implementation of a way to keep works copyrighted internationally? All contracting parties, in states like the United States, shall provide adequate legal protection and effective legal remedies against the circumvention of effective technological measures that are used by authors in connection with the exercise of the rights of its treaty, or the Berne Convention, and that restricts acts in respect to their works which are not authorized by the authors concerned or permitted by law. All right. So what it's essentially saying is, if you have one of these miserable Google I/O wristbands, and so I think I'm picking Google I/O because they gave me a wristband. I arrived the day early. They gave me a wristband and I had to wear it overnight. A horrible, miserable plastic wristband that, I've got this watch on, by the way, mostly because I was cool, I can keep track of time when I talk. It drives me crazy. If any of you were talking to me throughout the conference, you probably saw that I usually had it off, sitting on the table in front of me, or swirling through the air in front of me. I hate things on my wrist. I just sleep with this thing overnight. I couldn't stand it. I figured out a way to defeat it. But what if we were in a world where it wasn't just trespassing if you had a wristband and if you had a broken wristband, you went into the conference. What if it wasn't just theft of you using their resources? But what if it was also somehow just fundamentally illegal to tamper with a wristband? In my case, what I'll do, and this is, if you ever want to hack these things, you get a little tiny pair of cuticle scissors, and you cut under this white tab from this hole to this hole, and then you just kind of pull it, it'll snap it open one. And because it's hard plastic, it kind of heals. It's not going to have a giant gaping tear. It's just going to sit right up next to each other, and it's mostly going to get hidden under this white thing when you pull it back together. No one will ever figure out you made a modification. And I'm telling you this, and now maybe you can sneak into all sorts of parties. But it also allowed me to sleep that night. I don't think it should be illegal to modify a wristband. I think it should be illegal to use wristbands to go into other people's parties where you're not invited. All right, so Copyright ends up with this problem of, well, what happens when there is fair use? So this is a hilarious this is a Magic the Gathering card called Fair Use, which is a parody card. So from their perspective, it was fair use probably to use the Magic the Gathering stuff on it. I'm allowed to use it because I actually have the original credit down here in this, and you can use it if you've got the original credit. This fair use card can only target permanents with a single copy on the battlefield. Put a token on the battlefield with a copy of the target permanent and destroy the token when a second card with the same name comes into play. All right, so this is kind of a joke on the idea that Magic has got the thing where you want to play Magic the Gathering against somebody else, and you don't have the card that would actually make it fun, and you can't even figure out how to obtain the card that would make it fun because it's just a bunch of random draws, and it's just, and people are really upset about this, etc. Okay, fine, fair use. Oh, I do know. I love this big next slide. Yes. So the problem is that it destroys fair use when you are unable to do these. When you're unable to do things even though you're supposed to be able to do. Fair use are all the things you're supposed to be allowed to do with copyright. And if you're not allowed to defeat any of the technological measures, you're not allowed to do any of those things. So they decided to have a triennial rulemaking, where every 3 years you get an opportunity to ask for exemptions for all of the things that you would like to see not like covered by this. So if you would like to have wristbands not covered, I guess, you go to the DMCA every 3 years and you ask. And so we did this in 2012, we did this in 2015. This year I was actually on the panel, it was kind of fun. This was a panel of video game stuff that I wasn't supposed to be on, but I managed to get on the last second, it was kind of funny. I was dressed much better the next day. Kyle, my fix-it, and I brought an infinite number of devices that we had actually ended up spending like 20 minutes before court reporters had to like, I might be the term for it, had to like enter all of them into the congressional record, take pictures of everything, little post-it notes. We had tables full of these things. This is a demo that I was doing where I was trying to explain that like trying to say that we're able to have exemptions for phones and not tablets ends up just getting ludicrous. Like these devices are all, I'm just going to give you an explanation of the kinds of devices we're dealing with, starting with this very large Apple device, moving on to this slightly smaller Apple device, moving on to this slightly smaller Apple device, this slightly smaller Apple device, this slightly smaller Apple device, and this slightly smaller Apple device. But from my perspective, they're all flat pieces of glass. But from your perspective, I realize some of these are phones and some of them are tablets. You might ask the question, though, which ones of these have phone numbers? That might surprise you, because actually well, first of all, which ones of these are phones, which ones of these are tablets? This already might surprise you. These two devices are the exact same thickness, almost the same size. This one's an iPod 5, this one's an iPhone 6. They've got the same design, same style, same everything. Which ones of these have phone numbers? Well, my tablets both have phone numbers, because that's how they get internet service from Verizon. Which is always my frustration when I call Verizon and I'm trying to like get stuff. They're like, what's the phone number of your device? Like, I don't know. We'll send you a text message. How about we implement that? All right. But then you can also ask the question, if you know my phone number and you call me or send me a text message, which of these devices will buzz or ring? Well, thanks to FaceTime audio, iMessage, and now Hangouts, all of them. There's no difference between any of these devices. And I got to the point, at one point during the thing, I had an Apple Watch on. I took the Apple Watch off. I took the band of the Apple Watch off. If you take the band of the Apple Watch off, you actually end up with a device that looks just like if you hold it up an iPhone 2, and I had one. It's about the same thickness, about the same design. So, and I was able to, at the time, tell people that like there were people who've been working on jailbreaking the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch, and they've been making very good progress. And they tell me it's the same software stack internally. It's all the same. So, all right. Which leads us to some of the complexities related to this. So here, one thing people were very upset about, there's a lot of press about it, there was like this White House petition about unlocking cell phones. So this is different from jailbreaking. This is if you want to like take a phone from AT&T and put it on T-Mobile. People were very upset that we did not get a copyright exemption for the unlocking in 2012. They wanted this corrected. They actually managed to get this to like be retroactively changed by Congress. And now that 2015 was like, okay, you're going to look at this one better this time. Well, 2015, this time, we're actually looking at unlocking these little mobile hotspots as one. Some of these, no one actually was on the panel for this one, humorously. Really, there was a person who was on the panel for this one because she was for everything, because she wants everything as a computer. I totally agree with her. But what's funny about this is that no one's really against it either, except for General Motors, who ended up being the massive bully of the entire thing. Like the General Motors filed no against everything. General Motors was constantly like, mobile hotspot? That's a car. In-vehicle Wi-Fi, right? They were talking about how, consumer electronic device, that sounds like a motor vehicle. You've got a mobile, all-purpose computing device. Our cars are mobile, and we've got a computer sort of in them. We've got this OnStar thing. It was really frustrating, actually, because we ended up defining classes really well in order to try to make them not bother us, but there's actually thought I had, maybe I hit it, no I didn't, maybe right here, no. Okay, I thought I had a slide with Charlie Miller on it. Charlie Miller, that this year, this is the main reason I think why General Motors was really up in arms over stuff, is that they knew this was coming. Charlie Miller released a exploit at Black Hat, which was, you can essentially, I think it was Ford, you could take any Ford vehicle and remotely connect to it over the internet and like turn off its brakes, move its steering wheel. I mean, this is like, it was a very serious thing. It started with them just figuring out how to like track people using the GPS, and it turned into them being able to do all sorts of crazy things to the car and to other people on the road, and a really serious problem. All right. Now, funny thing about unlocking is that, so the reason why people are always asking these copyright exceptions on unlocking is you jailbreak a phone, then you'd unlock it. So there was a tool called Bootleader forever ago, something called Ultra Snow much more recently. These are things that would allow you to unlock your device, your jailbroken device. That's not how people even unlock devices anymore. We have not had a software-based unlock for any of the devices you care about, and maybe none of you care about, but any of the devices anyone really cares about with unlocking any of these things, since the last exemption cycle. Instead, the way these all work, and I always have, it's always funny, I don't actually be the guy who explains this always to the lawyers, who are always making these arguments. It actually works by you go to these websites and you put in your IMEI, and then there's some guy who works for AT&T, and he shows up, and he's a customer support guy, and he's got a list. And when you call him and you're complaining that you don't have good cellular signal where you are, he's explaining that you just need to like move 5 feet to the left. He's typing into the computer as you wanted your phone unlocked, and your IMEI was this number that he had on a sheet of paper. And then he copies the unlock code off, and at the end of the day, he sends it to you by email. That's why it takes some time. That's why the price jacked up really about 2.5 years ago, because that's about when AT&T really started cracking down and started becoming a risk. And essentially, you're looking at a black market. That's what this is. It's a black market. There are already many reasons why this is illegal. It really has nothing to do with copyright. Here's the example. These emails that are coming in like a day later. All right. So here's a situation where even if we have a copyright exemption, it doesn't matter unless we have a bug. Why bugs are so important to us is that we end up in a scenario where in order to have our fair use rights, we have to have bugs because copyright exemptions don't help. So you might think a little bit unlocking one. You didn't like that example, Jay. Why are we using that example? All right. So other things that the DMCA covers that we have to get exemptions for here are exemptions that have been filed this year. Motion picture excerpts, commentary, criticism, and educational uses. As an academic, as a person who teaches at a university, I'm allowed to, in my classes, educating things, I can use 30-second snippets of movies, as long as we're doing critique of the movie, as long as I'm not like just using it to get you guys to laugh or something. But I can't do that if the DVDs aren't encrypted, and luckily we all know the encryption code might be in one of your t-shirts. But you're not allowed to use that code legally, even for fair use, without this exemption. Literary works distributed electronically assistive technologies. So protected by technological measures prevent the enabling of read-aloud functionality or interfere with screen readers or other applications or assistive technologies. This one really sucks. This one is like, if you're blind, you're not allowed to read books unless we have both a copyright exemption and a bug. Motion pictures and other audiovisual works captioning descriptive audio. So what is if you're deaf? Blind, visually impaired, deaf, or hard of hearing. Oh, this is a general thing. Mostly this one is about getting the time sequence coding from the DVD so that you can sequence things onto it. And so like, if you're blind, you might still want to be able to sequence onto the DVD other content. But a lot of times this is for like adding closed caption tracks that somebody else developed that then gets synchronized onto the DVD at a later point. That's why it's usually mentioned for deaf people. But they got these extra things. Like it's always so narrow. When circumvention is accomplished solely to access the playhead and or related time code information embedded in copies of such works, and solely for the purpose of conducting research and development for the purpose of creating players capable of rendering visual representations of the audible portions of such works, and or audible representations or descriptions of visual portions of such works to enable it. Provided, however, that the resulting player does not require circumvention of technological measures to operate, which to me just, the whole thing is just dumb. Because that's what we need to do in order to actually do any of this stuff, right? That's why we're asking for the exemption. So really what I'm kind of trying to get to about the don't be evil by accident thing that I got from Mike, I'm not trying to tell you that I got that. I'm just trying, like, my thought process on don't be evil by accident is, so this is a person who came and actually spoke this year. This is an article that was written about him last year at JailbreakCon, but this year he came to JailbreakCon and he gave a talk. And he's sitting on stage talking about how he essentially can't update to a newer version of iOS. He can't update to a new version of iOS because he really needs the old version of iOS that has all of this assistive technology that people in the jailbreak community have been helping him with. There's a small community of blind people that go onto the jailbreak subreddit. They ask questions about, hey, could you build a feature that lets me do this with my phone? And people are always really happy to help, and so they do so. And it ends up in a situation where when you build systems that are locked down, when you build a system that is lacking a feature that somebody else needs, you force them to use a bug that they didn't want, that you didn't want, that no one wanted them to have, they didn't want to have, in order to emulate that feature. He's continuing to use buggy, broken, insecure versions of iOS because he needs assistive technology that Apple's not around to doing yet. And so just in order to make a personal point about this, in case it looks like I redacted something, but that was just a tooltip to Sorkin me there. Personal point about this is not letting people modify your software can be scary. And a lot of people have a lot of reasons about about modifying software and things like that. Or just allowing thinking about things in terms of being open or having APIs can be scary. People make comments about I run a payments platform, clearly I can never have. Okay, so Cydia itself was never really subjected to my tools. The reason why was not because I didn't want it to be, it was just because Cydia ran as root. And if you run as root, you are immune to most of the techniques that I was using to modify it. Also, if you run as root and you tried to manually load things, you can only do it wrong and it caused all sorts of problems. Finally, I got to the point where Cydia no longer runs as root. It now runs as mobile, and it's managed to isolate all the things that have to run as root into some separate things. So now Cydia, just like everything else in the operating system, can be modified. Everyone loves it, and I love it. Because it means that all the little minority feature requests that I was constantly dealing with, the people were like, oh, you have to add a preferences panel for this. I was just like, you can use that now. And they did. Within the course of the first week, there was a ton of random features for it that were adding the ability to have it be all black instead of all white, the ability to have it rotating the landscape, even though most of the interface didn't really look that good in landscape, they really wanted it in landscape. Adding all sorts of features to it. People added new ways of browsing the store to it, and maybe you might think that I was upset about it or anything. No, I loved it because it was fun watching people play around with all this stuff, and it did not affect my payments platform because my payments platform is designed to be secure in a way that has nothing to do with your hardware. If your payment system is reliant on my inability to modify your software running on my phone, you're already screwed. As Snapchat has demonstrated to us so gloriously with their incredibly large amount of engineering effort to do something that might even be a good point, but no, they failed. That's it.